Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am your host, Data T, and this is my channel, The Good Guys. Guys, today's story, we are going to go through one of the Trace's story, okay? The Trace here, okay? And I am going to be covering a lot of articles in a series that we call the Anti-Gunner Chronicles. And it's just going to be covering a bunch of stories that don't favor the Second Amendment, and in my opinion, they do not cover the issue fairly. So, with that, if you guys wouldn't mind leaving a like, leaving a comment, subscribe. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and you guys can hit me anywhere almost on social media, which will be on Minds, on Twitter, and on Truth Social. So we're gonna start this. I'm going to read this article in its entirety, and I'm going to cover some of the links, not all, and I will let you guys know what is relevant in this story. And guys, what I would say is just sit back and relax and listen to this, to the sound of my voice, and I'm going to go through this story. So first, let's begin with the title, Gun Buybacks Are Popular, but Do They Work? Now, in my opinion, they do not. Let us read. Offering cash for guns can be a quick way to get some firearms off the streets. Readers question whether the program actually reduces violence. On April 29th, Attorney General Letitia James plans to host New York's first statewide gun buyback. The one-day event will operate at 9 locations where officials will offer prepaid gift cards for up to $500 to people who turn in their firearms, no question. Now, they have had local buybacks, but this will be the entire state, okay? If we go to this particular website link, talks about it here. Attorney General James to host first ever statewide gun buyback. That's on April 29th, so it's upcoming. We will monitor that, okay, here. But it says here what they will do is they will give $500 per assault rifle or ghost gun, $150 per handgun, $75 per shotgun, $25 per non-working replica, antique, homemade, or 3D printed gun. Okay, so let us move on. It says here the buyback program aims to reduce gun violence, according to James' office, by offering an easy and risk-free way to get firearms off the streets and out of homes. New York is not the first state to attempt such an initiative. Connecticut hosts a similar buyback annually, and locally run buybacks are far more common. So if we go to this particular link, you will see that they do this. This is from that particular state of Connecticut. Then you look at their locally one here. They have that here, okay? And then it says here the buybacks. It says here they are far more common. This is the one that is in Baltimore, and they have buybacks all over the place. They have ones in California. They got ones in definitely New York. Every state, some majority of them have them, and they turn up all different types of things. I mean, you got I'll show you this real quick. Some of these buybacks will turn up very interesting items. In this case, this was a rocket launcher that was recovered in Baltimore. In that wild, okay? So you got something like that. You got also even in Los Angeles. I'll play this video real quick.
A rocket launcher, not just one, but two.
There's an ad that came there. I don't want to play that, but that was in Los Angeles. Okay, 2 showed up there in their gun buyback program. That was a couple years ago. All right, but let me go back to the story. It says here, the relative ease and low cost of running gun buybacks and the images they produce of tables covered with dozens of firearms have made them popular. Okay, let's see what that says in that link. Okay, this link is just talking more about the increase in gun violence, but then they also talk about across the nation. There's a bunch of things here, but we won't get into this. This looks like just a bunch of stats, but let's move on. The relative ease and low cost of running gun buybacks and the images they produce of tables covered with dozens of firearms have made them popular, both among law enforcement agencies and the broader public, but buybacks rarely garner national attention, nor are they frequently proposed by lawmakers as a scalable solution to America's gun violence epidemic. That's led our readers to routinely send in questions about the efficacy of gun buybacks. Below, we attempt to provide some answers. What is a gun buyback? It's exactly what it sounds like. In a gun buyback, a government, law enforcement agency, or community group offers compensation to people who turn over firearms. Generally, the goals are to reduce the overall number of guns in circulations, recover illegally possessed firearms, and remove guns from situations where people may harm themselves or others. Okay, it's important to distinguish gun buybacks in the United States from buybacks in other countries, where some have been national in scope and mandatory. Okay, this is the most important part here. Okay, that some of these gun buybacks are mandatory. If we look at Australia, and I believe they cite Australia, it says here, for example, Australia launched a mandatory gun buyback. If we click this link, we can see that. Okay, and that is what a lot of people try to use as an example, that hey, Australia, let's look at the Australia model. And what all that means is they want to do it mandatory, and mandatory buyback, guys, is confiscation, which is illegal here in the United States. Let us hear what this Mr. Beto O'Rourke, if you guys haven't heard of him, everybody I believe who knows who he is knows he is the flip-flop master. Okay, check this out.
I would institute a national buyback program.
Americans who own AR-15s, AK-47s, will have to sell them to the government.
I would look at a voluntary buyback.
I think if there was a ban on assault weapons and there was a buyback program, the vast majority of people, I think, would do the smart thing.
I support things like gun buybacks.
Okay, so there's a number of individuals there. Amy Klobuchar, this guy, he ran for president. He was unsuccessful. That guy. You got de Blasio, and you see Biden there, and you see Beto O'Rourke. So a number of these individuals who support buyback, but notice, none of them have said, that they would do it. What's the word? None of them said they would do it mandatory. Okay, and this is the only way it will work. Okay, mandatory gun buyback. Let's move along. Okay, now it says here, along with other reforms, after 1996 mass shooting in Tasmania, but in the United States, gun buybacks are typically at the local level, and participation is voluntarily. Okay, sometimes officials accept only operable firearms. In other locales, officials will take any gun regardless of its condition. In New York, for example, police are offering hundreds of dollars for working assault rifles and ghost guns, and as little as $25 for inoperable firearms, usually in the form of gift cards. Central to most gun buybacks programs is anonymity. Police often say they will not collect names, scan IDs, or ask questions. Okay, and that is because of the criminal element. But how many of these criminals are turning in guns? And I'm going to tell you, this has presented a very lucrative way to make some money. And why do I say that? Well, check this out. This man here, okay, he made $21,000 selling 3D printed guns during a New York, okay, gun buyback. Now, he did this last year, okay, and they're trying to do one this year. And it says here, look, 21,000 during a gun buyback. Okay, all he had to do was bring some of these 3D printed guns that, to be honest, from his point of view, he had said were inoperable. They didn't even work. Okay, so he had pieces. And then he's not the only person that has done this. Okay, we look at another case. Okay, let me close that. Another place in Houston. It says Houston man sells dozens of 3D printed guns at city's first gun buyback. And look what he does. He brings in a bunch of inoperable firearms. Okay, this is presented an opportunity where people can do this. And he says here, the man traded in 62 3D printed guns, often referred to as ghost gun, and received 50 per gun. He claimed making the weapons only cost $3 each. The large trade in a non-traditionally crafted firearms has prompted city officials to change guidance for future buybacks. But we'll see. Because I gotta tell you, if it's me, I will take all that money that's cash, and guess what? You go out and you buy more firearms. That's what I would do. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. Okay. It says here, in the U.S., gun buybacks date back to at least 1960, if not earlier. There has never been a national buyback program, but in 2000, the Department of Housing and Urban Development provided $15 million to support local buybacks. The program was eliminated the next year. Since then, at least 2 bills supporting voluntary local gun buybacks have been proposed to Congress but have not passed. Former Democratic presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke also proposed a mandatory assault weapons buyback during the primary. Okay, so this guy, he also proposed one. I think we already played it, which we did, and that was that. Okay, I didn't hear him say mandatory, but if they're saying that he has been quoted as a mandatory buyback, then I'm sorry, boss man, we don't agree with you. Okay, part of the reason why he lost. Okay, almost every race he's been trying to run and get any power, he should stay where he is. Okay, anyway, the next part of this article says here, sounds simple, but do they work? The answer is complicated, and I'm going to tell you guys here, the answer is not complicated. The answer is they do not work. And I'm going to give you my even actually from the article itself, they prove that the gun buybacks don't work. They're not significant in reducing crime. So here we go. It says proponents often point to the anecdotal evidence arguing that even one less gun on the street is a victory, but it's challenging to empirically measure the broader effects of small local run initiatives. It doesn't help that there's a dearth of reliable data on gun violence and on the number of guns in circulation, especially at the local level. As a result, many evaluations have instead focused on short-term effects that are easy to measure, like the number of participants, how many guns were collected, and public awareness, instead of the impact on homicides, suicides, and non-fatal shootings and assaults. They're difficult to study. Amanda Carbonaro, a researcher at the Rand Corporation who conducted a wide-ranging review of available research on buybacks, told The Trace, it's not because people aren't trying to use the best methods they can. Okay, let's see what this says here. Okay, so it talks about the gun buybacks. Okay, so this is some kind of study online, an article that they have here. Okay, that's not going to read. Definitely, if you guys come in here and read that, but I'm going to tell you it's not really significant of the story, so I'm going to move on. It says here, the most rigorous studies of gun buyback programs have found little empirical evidence to suggest that they reduce shootings, homicides, or suicides by any significant degree in either the short or long term. Okay, so what does that mean? They do not work. Okay, they have already come out and said it. If you look at some of these other articles, guys, they will mostly point to the same conclusion, that they have not worked. I'm just checking all the links. There is one that they did a while back, and I do want to highlight that particular study, and we'll come to it. Okay, if we go back to the article, Most rigorous studies of gun buyback programs have found little empirical evidence to suggest that they reduce shootings, homicides, or suicide by any significant degree in either short or long term. So we've read that already. This isn't surprising as per se, even under the assumption of optimal implementation. Only a tiny fraction of guns in a given community are going to be turned in to gun buyback programs. Okay, it says it here. Okay, only a fraction. It's unlikely that research using standard statistical methods will be able to identify the casual impact of buybacks on firearm violence. An analysis by the Trace earlier this year found that more than 16 million guns were produced for the U.S. market in 2020 alone, and somewhere between 350 and 465 million guns may be in circulation nationwide. Guys, that doesn't even account for the homemade firearms, does not account for the 3D market that people use to print firearms. I'm gonna tell you, in my opinion, this number of 465, just give it another 100 million. I would say close to 600 million guns are in circulation. Okay, that's my opinion. Anyway, meanwhile, even the most successful gun buyback events collect only a few hundred guns at a time. For example, over nearly 2 decades, guys, 20 years, New York City's gun buyback initiative collected just 10,000 guns. Only 10,000 firearms. What does that say? Okay, let's go to the analysis here. How many guns are circulating in the U.S.? Okay, we already got a number, so we don't really need to concentrate on that. Let me go back. If we could right-click this one, let's see. Nearly 100 weapons turned over to authorities and Staten Island's for cash. Okay, so 100 weapons out of how many? Okay, this is just a PR thing. This doesn't make any sense. Yes, the guns come off the street, but then you'll still have more firearm shootings and deaths and suicides and homicides and all those things. Okay. It's symbolic, but it does nothing. To curb the crime. Okay. Turning in small number of firearms, this is going back to the article, does not change the fact that they are readily available in many places. And this is the point. This is what Charbonneau said. And so you still have a flow of firearms through a community. If you think of it as a supply side intervention, the supply is barely affected. There are other shootings or shortcomings too. Studies have found that buybacks often collect inoperable guns, and we have already covered that. Guns that don't fit the characteristics of typical crime guns, or guns from people who are unlikely to be at risk of firearm violence. Several studies have found that people who participate in buybacks tend to be older, less likely to be involved in gun violence, and not residents of the city holding the buyback. And more people who turn over one gun still keep other guns at home. So maybe they get rid of a gun that they can't even sell, right? It says here, there are ways to tailor buybacks to get guns that pose a greater risk, but that may further reduce the number of guns collected. Meanwhile, most of the country, guns are easy to purchase, which is very true. Thank God that is the case, with limited restrictions and safeguards. If the evidence isn't strong that buybacks work, is there a downside to their popularity? This is the question that the article asks. It says there could be. Some researchers and advocates worry that by briefly acting on the public's desire for intervention, gun buybacks could be taking attention and resources from other reforms that are more likely to have an impact. Other interventions that have actually been shown to be effective. Okay, let's see what they have. Okay, facts about the effects of gun policies, what the evidence shows, hospitalizations, understanding firearms, how many Americans own guns, which have enacted for firearms. Do experts agree on any gun policy effects? I don't know what they are talking about when they talk about other effects here. It says here, at reducing violence are more expensive, take longer to get off the ground, and are politically and practically more challenging to implement. Some of the very reasons that people like buybacks are the things that could hinder their success. Charbonneau said, they're voluntary and they're small in scope, and they don't change anything about anyone's ability to purchase a gun. Thank God. I hope this article is coming across as the theme is, okay, that the gun buybacks don't work, in my opinion. And I don't think they will say this at the end, but from everything that I've read, it sounds like the gun buybacks don't work. Okay, and I know personally that they don't. Okay, it says here, are there other reasons to run buybacks? Buybacks can serve as opportunities to educate people about firearm safety and safe storage, or to provide free gun locks and safes. This would probably be the only reason why I go to the gun buyback. Okay, I'll 3D print a fake gun, turn it in, and if they can give me free gun locks and safes, I'll definitely go and pick some up. Only because it's free. But I'm not going there to turn in any operable gun. Hell no. But those efforts are also difficult to measure because of selection effects. In other words, the people who are likely to participate in a gun buyback may already be aware of gun safety, which is very true. Okay, you might be getting a fairly small number of people exposed to an intervention that intended to raise awareness. But it's only going to be people who already participate or see the advertising around gun buybacks. And Charbonneau said, and then at that point, you're pretty far away from intended outcome. Obviously, even if it's not realistic to expect buybacks to independently reduce rates of gun violence, the program may be able to shift views about guns and mobilize communities to work to reduce violence. The value of buybacks is principally as a mobilization tool, bringing together people and organizations who want to work on the problem. Dr. Garen Winnett I'm butchering her name. Wintemute, whatever. An expert on public health and gun violence at the University of California, Davis. This is what she's told to Trace. It says here, Wintemute co-authored the study that found, and what is this study? Let's see what this is. Now, guys, check this out. I've read this study, guys, and here is one of the most important parts. Okay, and I'm going to zoom in here so you can see it. Okay, and they cover it here. It says here, as such, it is not surprising that the impact evaluations have failed to find any link between gun buyback programs and subsequent decrease in gun violence. That's the kicker there. Okay. In 2005, the National Academies Committee to Improve Research, Information, and Data on Firearms concluded that the theory underlying gun buyback programs is flawed and that the empirical evidence demonstrates the ineffectiveness of these programs. Okay, so if you needed evidence, if you needed proof about gun buybacks, here it is. It does not work. Okay, the National Academies Committee to Improve Research, Information, and Data on Firearms, they came to that conclusion. Okay, it does not work. Okay, the aim is to decrease crime, but guys, it doesn't work. Okay, so there's a lot of other things in here I wanted to talk about before we finish up the story. Okay, one of my questions was how come, if they're going to publish some of the statistics on crime itself, why don't they cover defensive gun use, people that use firearms? Okay, and they don't. And here is some proof here, because in the CDC site, they used to actually highlight it here. It says, what is defensive gun use and how often does it occur? They used to cover it here, guys, and it used to give us the number, and the number was between 60,000 to 2.5 million people use their guns in self-defense every year. How do I know this? Okay, it was taken out, okay, by these anti-gunners, and Reddit reported it. It says emails show CDC removed defensive gun use stats, okay, after gun control advocates pressured officials in private meeting. This is coming from the Reload. Now, if we go to the Reload story, we can see that this was the case. And it says here, the advocates focused their complaints on the CD's description of its review of studies that estimated defensive gun use, DGU, happened between 60,000 to 2.5 million per year, attacking the criminologist Gary Kleck's work, establishing the top end of the range. Okay, now this is what they said. These are one of the top gun groups. This is what they said here, and we'll give out a name. It says here that 2.5 million number needs to be killed, buried, dug up, killed again, and buried again. This was according to Mark Bryant, one of the attendees who wrote to the CDC officials after their meeting. It's highly misleading, it's used out of context, and I honestly believe it has zero value, even as an outlier point to in honest DGU discussions. Okay, he runs, okay, Mark Bryant runs the gun violence archive, and he says that his estimate has been damaging to the political prospects of passing new gun restrictions and should be eliminated from the CDC's website. What the fuck? Okay, how has this man have so much sway to have the CDC, a government agency, to get rid of this statistic that we used to know about? I mean, for years, this is what we would cite. Okay, and for all this bullshit about how the government cannot track or research gun related issues, they used to do it. But we had a particular anti-gunner agents or group come and strike this from the page. It is no longer there, guys. It used to be there. Okay, in their review of studies, if I were to open this up, okay, it used to be there on their CDC site. Okay, and this was the fast facts page that I showed earlier. Okay, used to be there, now it's gone. Okay, and what did people do about it? Okay, the senators, this was last year, demanded answers about CDC censorship of defensive gun use statistics. Okay, 5 Republican senators are pressing information from the Center of Disease Control about the removal of information related to the defensive use firearms CDC website. Because, guys, it used to be there every time. Also, all we had to do is, hey, look, the CDC says we are using our guns defensively, and now that is gone. Okay, so guys, I did want to cover this. And let's go back to the very end of the article. Okay, we covered that study, and it says here, Wintemute co-authored a study, that's the study that we just saw in the PDF, that found that the buyback programs could be tailored to collect firearms that better fit the profile of crime guns. The study was unable to determine whether the tailored buyback independently reduced gun violence. So even though she suggests that it can be tailored, they are unable to determine whether the tailored buyback would actually work. Do you see that? Okay, which means it doesn't work. And it says here the key, this lady said, Wintemute said at the time, is for the work to continue beyond the buyback. So even though they know it doesn't work, they want to continue the program. And that to me is a waste of time. Okay, so guys, I want to tell you that this is always something that I always wanted to talk about and cover. But guys, we have it here, and we have the evidence. We've gone over their article, The Trace, and they are the ones making the argument. I know they're just talking about it, but in my opinion, this article proves gun buybacks do not work. So guys, if you wouldn't mind, again, you guys can leave a like, a comment. You can comment on this story. I know it's pretty long, but if you could, go through it yourself, I'll leave all the links that I had come across so that you can read about this yourself and get more educated on the issue. I have no problem doing that, guys. I always tell people this one thing, and it sticks. I think it sticks to people so that they can reference it, that they can understand it, is that good people carry guns. Okay, good people always should have guns. They should have multiple guns, because if good people, if good men and women, if they do nothing, there will be no good guys.